Hi, this is Dizzy, and I'm going to make a video today about the concept that if we must pity the borderline, we must rethink the narcissist. I will say that if you are borderline and have been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder and you feel a little bit fragile about that diagnosis, this may not be a good video for you. I am making a point, although I also believe everything I am saying. So, anyway, I figured I would take advantage of one of the few sunny days we've had here in upstate New York and utilize a blog post I made, and hopefully it'll be useful to some of you. So, anyway, I shall speak on this subject, which will probably get me a good bit of hate mail. If we must pity the borderline, we must rethink the narcissist. Narcissist, in the last few years, it seems like everyone knows one. It seems like everyone was either raised by at least one, have dated several, and especially if it was a nasty breakup, it definitely must have been a narcissist, right? It seems, quite frankly, that if one is not overly fond of a person, it's because the person must be a narcissist. The word is thrown around with the same hatred and shredded meaning as trash, but with all the self-victimization as a person being called with seething hatred trash. The word's got a bite to it and some sting, which is what we all want when we are bashing a person. We've been given a free card to just plain hate them. But what is a narcissist? You know, what does that actually mean? And why are they so very terrible? Pathological, long-standing, and prevalent narcissistic behavior is what is known as narcissistic personality disorder. Personality disorders do not go away, and they can be toned down. It's not vanity. It's not over-exaggerating how fabulous you are necessarily. And it's not even just low empathy. It is destructive. That's what the cluster B and other malignant personality disorders are. They're destructive. The ones that make for a good villain in a thriller, or the type you love to hate in a comedy, as far as fictional goes. They're the serial killers, the angels of death, the home wreckers, and the train wrecks. Let's look at who else takes the company of the dreaded narcissist under Cluster B. Cluster B is called the dramatic, emotional, and erratic cluster. It includes borderline personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder, antisocial personality disorder, and histrionic personality disorder. I think I said all of them. Borderline, narcissistic, histrionic, antisocial. Just in case I repeated myself, as I do tend to do. Disorders in this cluster share problems with impulse control and emotional regulation, meaning they can be explosive. Sometimes they will use self-injury or the harming of others or erratic behavior because they don't know how to. They never really advance past childhood as far as taking control of their own emotions. Anyway, not so surprising that the malignant types are grouped together, right? You know, that's why it's a cluster B. So what does malignant mean? Disposed to cause harm, suffering, or distress deliberately. Feeling or showing ill will or hatred. That's not pleasant, but like I've said, these are the personality disorders that make for what we collectively like to call evil. Whether or not you believe in evil as a real force or not, you know, sometimes it's easier to generalize. The life destroyers, you know, bringers of drama, but wait, isn't borderline just self-injurers who feel sadness and loneliness too intensely? Isn't that what borderline is? Don't they just have a fear of abandonment? The website The Mighty, of the holy grail of mental health and feeling bad for yourself, told us not to stigmatize borderline personality disorder. They can't help their mental illness. Oh, wait right there. So they cannot help their mental illness, which is sitting pretty next to antisocial and narcissistic personality disorder, never mind histrionic. But the borderline deserves empathy, care, compassion, and understanding that the psychopath and narcissist don't. If you don't know this, antisocial is basically code for psychopath, although they are not always mutually exclusive. You know, some professionals may disagree with me on that, but what is considered socially acceptable depends upon the times. Anyway, so let's look at what borderline personality disorder actually consists of. Other than alarming suicide attempt rates and putting off therapists from ever wanting to touch the case. If you hear rattling, that's because my car is on. Sorry about that. Okay. They idealize and devalue the people they get close to, minute to minute. The triangulation that narcissists and psychopaths use to keep their victims trapped in a, relationship cycle with them, borderlines do it too. But they do it with a touch of dramatic flair, which somehow calls for empathy. Life is not a Broadway show as much as I so wish it was. Okay. Often in the form of emotionally blackmailing over their very own lives. If you leave, I'll kill myself. Instead of making their victims feel drawn to them again and bringing about more oxytocin release like a narcissist might do, they say things like, if you leave, I'll kill myself, I hate you, please don't leave me. There's literally a book about borderline that I believe the title is something like, I hate you, please don't leave me. These are the psycho girlfriends of the personality disorder world, if we're to follow, my fictional reference from earlier. And unfortunately, it's vastly overdiagnosed in women and missed entirely in men. Men will usually be told, oh, you just have a little anger problem. I am not here to demonize anyone who has borderline personality disorder, but I'm not here to pretend it's the only disorder on that cluster that deserves human compassion. Narcissists are thought to be formed by childhood neglect and abuse, but we don't have a window's worth of light we wish to shine on that disorder. What actually happens to the narcissist is that they become so terrified of vulnerability that they will do anything to avoid it, whether it's to be covert. Think of your introverted and too sensitive for this world friend, or to be grandiose, an overt narcissist, and far superior to everyone else. Think of your friend who is never wrong and exaggerated every job title they've ever had. And so there has been talk of renaming narcissistic personality disorder as a vulnerability aversion disorder. People don't want them to change that term because a narcissist is a narcissist. A bad person is a bad person. Well, if the shoe fits and the old one has holes in it, why can't we just lace that new one up and wear it? When did we collectively decide that someone's low empathy is an excuse to throw our own empathy out the window, right along with compassion, rational thought? Maybe we want an angry buzzword like narcissist. Forget helping the people with the personality disorder the same way we would maybe an avoidant, which is on a different cluster. We just want someone to hate. We just want someone to hate. And we want it easy. We want someone easy to hate. And don't pretend you don't. So are you really going to bully people who are utterly terrified of being vulnerable? Where the borderline may literally bleed their vulnerability out of their bodies to get their way, sometimes to complete strangers. The narcissist will pretend they don't have blood to get their way. If they have blood, they have a weakness. And who needs that? Who needs to be human? Who needs it? Not the narcissist. Narcissists do require lots of narcissistic supply, so do psychopaths. They need. Narcissists need, no matter what they tell you. Much like the borderline needs you to stay and needs you to love them, the narcissist needs you to have an opinion about them. They need it. Love them, hate them, but do not ignore them is what their minds are kind of like. To be ignored is to be raw, like a baby crying and ignored. I personally have an issue with the cry it out method with babies for this reason. Causes lots of agitation later in life. So, to be ignored is to be raw, like a baby crying and ignored, maybe even for hours, where the pathology began. The birth of that very narcissist. Narcissism is often born of neglect. Infantile neglect, childhood neglect. Think of a neglected child on the street. What about in 20 years? Who are they in 20 years to you? Huh? Empaths? Empaths who, without a doubt, every single person I've met who has claimed to be an empath has claimed to be abused by a narcissist. And I think a lot of you empaths think you're narcissists. Or at best, borderline. These sunglasses are not actually for dramatic effect. The light is changing kind of around where I am due to the clouds, and it's really messing with me. And they're prescription. So I'll end this on one note. Mark Twain wondered who might have been decent enough to pray for the devil. I'm not as brilliant as Twain. I simply wonder who might be decent enough to pray for that neglected infant, even if it's 30 years after the crying came to a bitter end. So, if we must feel empathy and avoid stigmatizing the borderline, we have to rethink the narcissist. We have to. Otherwise, we need to just go ahead, come out with it and say, I just want a specific group with a malignant disposition to just hate. And anyone who doesn't like me, I'm labeling them that. Let's stick with logic, people. Let's not just stick with who's easy to hate. I can give you that. Anyway, this has been Dizzy. I hope everyone's doing well. And I hope everyone has a great Easter. So,